Is there anything else we need to add to this or not? Do you know of? I'll move to approve the agenda for there then.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Get a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, we got any public comment?
To put the dollar store down, you know, out there where we didn't want it. How can we get the road, the signs back up, no lake access, and no outlet?
I'm having a hard time hearing you, sir.
So the signs for
Speak
down
up.
Ratner Road got moved?
What's that?
The signage for Ratner Road got moved?
Yeah, South Radnor, we
Yeah.
went north of Dollar General's going in. We've got trucks coming down, construction trucks, and it's a dead end road. There's no lake access, we had people voting before, but now we're having construction people come down. It's a dead end road. I mean, there's no lake access, there's no, you know, there's no outlet. You've got to turn around, come back out, and our roads are already terrible, so I didn't know whether it was up here or the township meeting. That's,
It was a township road. Yes.
I don't know.
And somewhat, so the county did a road agreement, so the Osage County took over the maintenance of the portion of the road that is by Dollar General. So,
Beyond that, it's Junction Township.
yes.
Yeah.
But the signage in the county
Road and Bridge would
is
have to
Road
be
and
doing,
Bridge.
Road and Bridge would have to
Okay.
be doing the
They
signage.
used to have the signage there.
Yeah.
And it got run over, mowed over, and now it's not there, but that's where the dollar store is at now, or putting in, so I don't know who it belong to, the county or it's gonna be the township. I didn't know the address.
I would
Well, I
say
understand it's
Road-
gonna be counties from the
Yeah.
highway. The highway department takes care of so much of it, and then it'd be the county down to the Dollar General driveway.
Oh, okay.
And then it goes back to the
Yeah,
township.
it goes back to township.
Okay, because like I said, where the signs were is where their driveways are at.
Yeah, it would still be Road and Bridge would be their responsibility to put the sign.
I will get with Ryan tomorrow
Yeah.
and talk to him and let him know that they need to be put back up.
All right, thank you.
Oh,
bet.
thanks for coming.
Any other public comment? CUP Z 2501. Nothing. Tell us what you wanna do.
Is that ours?
That's you. That's who it says it is.
2501.
Get out of here.
I did bring a couple photos I realized I hadn't submitted with, but it just shows the outside of the barn and the inside of the barn, so if you guys want.
So,
I'll send it back that way, because that's all board members down here.
You wanna tell us what you wanna do now?
So we have this barn on our property that we've fixed up several years ago, it's an old barn, and, we use it for our own things, we've had graduation parties and anniversary parties, and we have some barn dances and stuff. And through the years, people have reached out and asked if I would rent it, and I've always said no. At the time, it wasn't something that I wanted to take on, I had to wait till my kids got out of school. A lot of the activities would probably be
Is there power there? You have power there?
Yes.
Yes. About the only thing I can see is what her comment was, you have a 300-gallon septic tank there, and it is gonna be, with any number of people there, you're gonna have a little, can have a little problem.
Yeah, when Jan was out the other day, Jan came to visit, so she was asking about that, and so, we had visited about that, and so I think, in regards to that, I think in the application, if people are applying or filling out the application for an event, I think I would just need to put on there, Jan brought up something about handicap, possibly accessibility, and then like the number of people it might serve. So I think what we would have to do is determine if someone's asking for an event, what their number of people they think are gonna attend, and then if whatever number capacity that serves, the difference we may have to just, on a case-by-case basis, just rent like a, either handicap porta potty or just a porta potty. So, when she visited with us about that, that's kind of what we kind of talked through on how to.
And of course, we have several places around that have, they clean your tank out, which they can likewise just pump them out too.
Yeah.
If you feel like it's inadequate, you can make it a holding tank. It takes more money now, I'm sorry to say it.
Has there been any issues with some of the bigger events or, personal events that you've held with the system?
We've not ever had an issue.
Yeah, we've had multiple graduation parties of 150 people coming in and out of there throughout the course of the evening. Never had any problems with the subject.
No problem with them parking on the road then.
They usually always they park in a little grassy area that we have. They don't park on the.
Off the road.
Well, on our property.
Yes,
Yeah.
off the road.
Correct,
That's,
yeah.
that's the point, because, if they can't get off the road, there they are on the road.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, we don't want to make our neighbors mad.
We'd appreciate you didn't too.
Is your parking area, is it just grass, dirt, gravel? What do you got for?
It's our pasture area, so we raise steers a couple times a year, and then we have horses, and we've got 3 different little spots, and so we kind of rotate them
Paddocks.
through there. So the pasture area is what we use for our parking area.
It works good in climate weather. If it was raining, you got a problem, won't you?
Well,
To have parking,
But this is also a fair season event venue. It's not.
Right.
I mean, it's not heated, it's not cool.
right,
It's very rustic, so. But yes, you're exactly right.
right.
and we do have I don't know if the picture shows it, but we have a really large, I call it a circle drive, but I guess it's a big U, and it's all
Yeah.
gravel, so.
Yeah,
It shows it.
Yeah, so that can always, in the event that maybe it was muddy and there were people with cars that didn't want to park in that area, we've got that huge circle drive, it's all gravel that is available. And there's gates at both ends, so if they started on one end, they can get out on the other end, so it's literally a whole.
the only problem that comes is with the fire. Because if you get double parked in there, and then a fire truck has to get in, you have a problem, or an ambulance, either one. I'm thinking, we had this on a county road years ago when there was a farm sale, and they had an accident, and they had a nightmare getting, it was wet, so the farmers didn't park over as far as anybody should have. They didn't all have 4-wheel drives at that time. And they had a nightmare getting the blickety-blank fire trucks surrounded, but, come into the sale and had people go out and move the trucks. It was a nightmare, but I'm on the fire board up.
Well, the driveway where the barn's at is really close, where the driveway is kind of way up by the house and
Right,
around.
right.
So if there was a fire truck coming in, the barn is
Right
right
there.
there
Yeah.
by the entrance.
Well, it's by the road too.
Well, I've never known anybody to park between the road, the entrance, and the barn.
Yeah, we never have, we
Yeah.
don't let, we have a certain way that we line the cars along the fence, and then we line the cars around the tree row, so we always get them all lined up. And so, yeah, nobody parks from there to anywhere along that.
Okay.
Yeah. And part of that reason also is we have an area where you can actually drive into the barn. And so we've had instances like it's been my grandparents when they were alive or other people that really shouldn't be walking very far. We pull them right into the barn and then we can back out and go park. So that's another reason why nobody would park along from the road to the entrance of that barn, is because it's available to let people off.
Right.
Or
That's,
if people are
that's
dropping
good.
off equipment and stuff. then-
You've thought of what I thought then, so
Yeah.
Anybody else got anything?
The only other thing, I mean, it just was just the capacity of the people with the sewer, and if, I hadn't thought about it until earlier today, but I was like, well, like, you know, porta potties, or if you know what you're up against, you could supplement your capacity with that.
Yeah, you mean with like the porta potty?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
other events, I mean, if you know
Yeah,
you
well,
got
that's
200
fine.
people coming, then
Yeah.
might
yeah,
even be a good idea, so you don't tax your system or have to
Yeah.
pump it.
After Janet brought that up when we got to visiting, and I thought, well, I'll just have to put that on the application that says what's the number of people invited or possibly attending, and that's gonna let us know. what-
Or handicap,
Or
if,
handicap.
if they
And
have
that way-
someone
that
in
way
the
if you're
party
renting
that's,
something, you're renting what you need.
Yeah.
You don't wanna rent a handicap one if you don't need it.
Right.
yeah.
So I think we could solve that by part of
I'm sure there are handicap porta potties,
Oh,
I've never
yeah.
seen
the.
one.
Yeah, I've already looked them up.
Okay.
Yeah, I looked up what it costs to rent them, how many days for a weekend, what it costs to buy, so, I mean,
Okay.
Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're-
they're not cheap.
a lot of options there.
yeah, yeah.
Kina, what would you say the number of people would be for a 300-gallon?
Or how many flushes?
Oh, I mean, it's seasonal, you know, they haven't winterized when I was out there, so it's only gonna be, excuse me, used during season. I mean, it's just with the standard toilet and the sink, they don't have anything else go into it, so, you know, you could probably get away with a couple hundred people, assuming you have a mix of 50-50 male and female. And you have to look at reality of who's gonna use it. And so, it's probably okay, I mean, the only thing I'd recommend is just get the tank pump more frequently. And remind people not to flush stuff.
When I was out there, I noticed the toilet had on it 1.6 GPF, so that's 187 flushes before it would fill the 300. So you could say 2 if somebody's gonna wash their hands, and, so that's 150.
That is provided the float's never been changed, Jan.
That's
You
what
know what I'm saying?
you know, who knows, that's what it said. That was the,
I
And the
understand.
tank's empty to start.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know that I have any other concerns. It sounds like they've got a backup plan to cover for the capacity.
It
That's right.
serves for a smaller, more affordable venue for smaller events.
Yeah.
I think, which is needed, because not everybody has $5,000 to spend on one of these
Those
big
big
ones
money.
that we have, you know. So I think it's a benefit to the county.
Is there any public comment on this? No. Somebody got a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve CUP Z2501. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Now you go talk to some other people.
Yeah, now you gotta talk to other people.
It'll be weird sitting on this side. Thank you.
Thanks.
I haven't been by your place in a while, but that is pretty.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
It is a good, special place. Yep.
All right, now the old business, called the comprehensive plan. Assume everybody's got through it.
Russ, my suggestion was that we go through one section at a time, maybe set aside an hour after every monthly meeting to go through a section if it would take that long.
You haven't read it?
Of course I've read it, but
Okay.
are there changes that I have a lot of yellow marks in mine. Are there changes that we need to make, to take out, to add in? And I want it to be the zoning board that does that, and I think that's what the law requires, and not economic development. I think it needs to be the board, so,
We have to approve it, you're right.
yeah. So I think it needs more than just a dusting and move on. So, I mean, there's sections we don't use. Do we need that on the books, or do we?
And a couple conversations Sarah and I had is that we don't see, it pretty much pertains mostly to the economic development part. There's not really any step-by-step stuff to help us as a board.
No, it's not gonna help us in
in
any way.
approving or not approving the CUPs or knowing kind of what direction we're supposed to take, which we kind of thought maybe we'd have more guidance.
And we can certainly get more detail in the objectives that we covered last spring. So if you recall, we focused early on the goals and objectives of the existing plan. I've added some, we updated it in the fall of '22 to account for our county's renewable energy policy change. So what we have here is think of it as an analogy would be a recipe of just a simple white sauce. So we can add spice to it, we can add different ingredients to it and make it into a number of different things. So what we have here is the very basic outline or shell of a comprehensive plan. I would argue that for a comprehensive plan, the goals and objectives, the last few chapters and that last table are things that are very fluid. That's what our job starting last month, when we got you the book, is to start digesting it, reading it, taking what needs to come out or for discussion, and center it that way. The comp plan and its chapters, it would be my opinion that some are, most of the initial, I'd say 4 to 5 chapters or background information. It's an accounting of the topography, what we're challenged here with. For example, just the CUP that we finished discussing and recommending. So what do we usually lean on? We usually lean on Keenan. She is the problem with Osage County. I think we can all agree. So, no, she's the problem insofar as that she's the one that really controls whether you can put a house on this acreage, things of that nature. We are typically very open to development. But with a rural county like ours, and the cities within it relatively small, they don't have a huge growth ring around them. Osage City, the largest, isn't going to annex more than a half mile away from the city limits. So it's not like we can let our cities of Osage City and Linden capture a lot of that growth, or Carbondale for that matter, or Overbrook, since that's kind of in the growth quadrant. So we really do rely on on-site infrastructure to determine whether a project that we are going to be responsible for reviewing is going to be satisfactory as it relates to infrastructure. So we do have goals and objectives that should go into helping us make decisions, I should say legally defensible decisions. So that's something else. I know there was some confusion amongst various individuals as to what should go into a comprehensive plan. I will say, I work for Osage County. I will deliver you a comprehensive plan that you want. This looks a lot like a comprehensive plan developed under the state statutes. So what a comprehensive plan is a central hub of information. So we give physical description of of Osage County. A little bit into soils and geology, because that affects where development can happen on site without a municipal system. It At the end of the day, when we're finished going through our next few months' worth of reviews and meetings, we have meetings scheduled with department heads. That's gonna have information. If you notice, I believe it's in chapter 5, public facilities. We talk about emergency management services, we talk about sheriff's department, a little bit about quasi-public transportation and things of that nature. So these department heads will then be able to come to us in these meetings, say, hey, we have this on our horizon, let's put it in the book. This project was being talked about for a couple of years, now it's off the table. We can then decide whether we should still have it in there for reference purposes. Maybe something changes in another 2 years, right? And then that's back on the table. So we had concerns, initial concerns, what I was going to be doing with renewable energy. Russ gonna speak in there. No, absolutely not. I'm a builder of this comp plan. You tell me how you want your kitchen, I may have my opinions, but I'm not building for myself, I'm building for Osage County. So, that's kind of the way that works. Now, if we have to be more specific in some of our land use objectives, and by that, I mean more rigid, we need to be more definitive, saying this is what we do not want, this is what we do want. We can certainly refine the book to hit the mark. There was some concern that was brought to my attention that we don't have a lot of in-depth discussion on actual zoning standards, on such things as, some other examples. You know, it doesn't really include a lot with the sanitation code or other codes that affect land development in Kansas. And I would say, and my response to that was, yes, it doesn't belong in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan directs us to future action. So this plan may call for a change of zoning regime, or we want to see our zoning process, this process of adjudicating conditional use permits, to be more structured. We want to have more definitive regulations on X, Y, and Z. Those specific outcomes don't belong in the comprehensive plan, they belong in the zoning regulations or the subdivision regulations. Or we call for the sanitation code to be updated, or we call for the establishment of a building department for code enforcement and building inspection. So the comp plan identifies and hopefully illuminates things that are obviously problematic, but things that are just, things are going fine, we can do something maybe just a little bit better, a little bit more thorough. Maybe we should be less concerned with certain things and more concerned with other things. That goes in the comp plan, and then it points to various department heads, to me and Tricia, and Keena, for example. You know, I think Keena and I have talked in the past about the age of our sanitation code, and you may be able to answer right off the bat whether that's something that should be updated, or, you know, as the next type of land development process, do we need to take a look at the sanitation code? The comp plan will call for that action, but that action will be separate and apart from the comp plan development. And I think there was some confusion as to what a comprehensive plan should be. So, you know, when we walk in here, we probably should have a copy of the comprehensive plan, a copy of the zoning and subdivision regulations,
Right.
and a copy of the sanitation code in a large binder for reference. Dave, you're out.
Right here.
Exactly.
Hello.
I have Dave's phone one for that. Now, I don't carry with me the sanitation code because I'm not responsible for the sanitation code. So, but anyway, those booklets are put together because those really represent the kind of the four pillars, if you will, of our land use decisions. So I'll answer any questions that you may have on that. But, you know, I would think that we'd be able to maybe get through the first couple of chapters.
At least. My problem is.
You know, there's the background, so I'm not sure
Right.
what to argue the history of Osage County in chapter
But the
1.
point is, we're to review this. We're
Yes.
not to rewrite it every year or every 10 years, we're to
Yeah.
review it. Now, our zoning reg, to me, that's the one that makes, we need to go every year and look at that darn thing. More
Well, I
than
think
we
we've been
do.
doing a pretty good job. We sit here,
Well, every year we change something.
we do. Yeah, and there's other communities that I work with that I can't get them to stop making changes. We're making a change next month that we, in a chapter that we just made a change to. So you can't time it. These problems fall out of the sky, land on Tricia. She composes herself and calls me. Well, we know then the next time we need to amend the zoning regulations.
Right.
So we usually come up with the problems in live time here when we go through review and ultimately recommend a CUP or zoning change, the zoning action. Then we call for me to write up a memo that talks about here's how we address this problem by amending the regulations. The last major, really quite frankly, the most major change that we've had to our pillars of planning was obviously in the summer and into the fall of '22, where we started by saying, hey, we may be getting some solar projects coming our way. We need better standards. So if you recall, we spent 2 or 3 meetings reviewing some proposed solar regulations that I created elsewhere. I think right as we were getting ready to have a public hearing on those expanded solar regulations, we were asked to do kind of a 180. And instead of supplementing our zoning standards for solar, we wanted to have a public forum to address whether or not Osage County intends to host any renewable energy system. And over that course of the summer and several public meetings later, it was revealed that we wanted to have a different policy of not hosting renewable energy systems.
Was very
So we
clear.
learned that we needed to revise the comprehensive plan, to amend the comprehensive plan, to stick in an objective legal foundation for why Osage County doesn't want to host renewable energy systems, along with the actual prohibition of those systems in our zoning regulations. So that's the 1-2 punch. We needed the policy to direct the action of amending our regulations. So when we went then last year through the electric transmission line question, we realized that we didn't need what we had done to the comprehensive plan the year prior was good enough to cover that additional zoning amendment. So that's the dance, that's how we operate. Is it possible that we're going to adopt this plan, let's say early summer, late spring, whenever it is? And I'll get to that here in a second. When we get to the end of the road, I mean, a week later, we may have something that comes out of left field and it's just kind of like, why couldn't that have happened a month earlier? We could have addressed it. So it's not uncommon and it's not heavy lifting to modify these documents over time. As a matter of fact, that's our legal requirement, is to review and address any omissions, additions, etc., to not only the comprehensive plan, but to our regulations. So yes, usually, to Mr. Thompson's point, we do a pretty good job of immediately getting on zoning amendments to address those in real time. The comp plan, you're going to see us schedule that for 1 month a year and have it on our agenda to discuss. And 95 times out of 100, that discussion, is there anything that we need to change about the comp plan? No. Next agenda.
The biggest change we made in this one, we were talking about zoning codes, or
Building.
building codes,
That's
wire
kind of the
codes.
homework. So,
Of course, that's still gotta be approved by the county commission.
as for the approval process, just to go over that really briefly.
Sorry, Russ.
Yes.
Can I just add one other thing at a very big picture level? The other important component of this is we're putting in an annualized process so we can strategically go after those things. So that's just a big picture level of why this is important and why our county leadership needs to be a part of the process. Sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to add that.
So what I usually do at this stage, and I'll take direction from the commission, is to set the public hearing, to ratify this. We need the planning commission to make a recommendation for adoption to the county commission. We could notify for our March meeting that public hearing. And I usually do that, I would suggest doing that at this stage because we can keep rolling that back and pushing it back until we finally get to a point where we're comfortable making that recommendation. But we are allowed to make a recommendation then at any meeting following that public hearing. So March 20, whatever, 26, 27.
Do we go to Wednesday nights in March?
That'll be our first Wednesday
Yeah.
night meeting. So that last Wednesday of March will be the public hearing. I would suggest not taking action on recommending the plan, one way or the other, at that point. But that's U5's comfort level. So ultimately, March rolls around, we have a discussion, we hear public input, and if we don't feel comfortable, the majority doesn't feel comfortable making a recommendation, and I would highly suggest that this be a unanimous decision to move it forward. We're not looking for a 3-2 vote to push it forward, right? Something like this really should be, we all should be rowing in the same direction. And I don't think we're gonna have any issues with that, but, so at some point, we're gonna get comfortable, let's say it's the April meeting. In March 11th, we're going to have a workshop session with these department heads that I mentioned previously. And at that level, we'll get that levels of input, right? So we're gonna, maybe nobody cares. Oftentimes, that's really the outcome. They look at their section, Russ Amy didn't write anything bad, didn't require the sheriff's department, for example, to make any budgetary expenditures or something like that. I'm not throwing in some giant pie-in-the-sky goal for them. They may say that's fine as written. But if we do get some information from that meeting, then it'll be presented to you before, it'll get out to you and presented during that March meeting. Then we can, each meeting, where are we at? We need more work, we need 6 months more work, we need to get a new planning consultant, whatever the outcome of those meetings is, right?
You're not gonna get that lucky.
Yeah, I know. So from that standpoint, that's kind of the general outline. So again, if, the one thing that I certainly do not want is for anyone on the commission to feel pressured into chop, let's take our time with it. We're right at the stage where our discussions kind of left off late spring, early summer last year, until we just had the document. So now we have the draft document, think of it as a shell to home, and now we're going to decorate the interior, take out siding and shingles. So that's kind of the 1,000-foot overview on the process. Whether we get through, I guess we can start at chapter 1 and go until we stop. So from that standpoint, I don't know if I had misheard something, but this is certainly, a comprehensive plan is certainly not intended to be an economic development plan. Again, we talked about this being a repository, calling for other action items. That's exactly what this would do. If we have a need for various broad-based economic study or a very strategic economic development strategy, that would be Colleen's then to take as a relay. She'll take the baton and her and her department will put that together to the benefit of the county commission, right? Likewise, sanitation code, if we have land use codes, I think all of us are pretty, I think the machine goes down the road pretty well on the number of development applications we have and how we process them. I'm not sure if I'm hitting Tricia with this cold or if we've talked about it, but, you know, one thing that would maybe bring your point into a little bit better focus is the staff report. Doesn't have to be in-depth. I've seen the little city of Andover, Kansas, you know, they'll put together a 24-page staff report for whatever purpose, but, you know, a 2 to 3 page report that has our findings and how it plugs into the comprehensive plans is one of those factors that we use to validate our recommendation of denial or a recommendation of approval. It's based on those findings of fact or those zoning factors, whatever they call them, that's in our zoning code. You know, perhaps having a staff report with a little bit different information related to their zoning factors could be included in the package, whatever that looks like. But short of that, yes, sir.
Russ, the only thing I guess I'm looking at is, this is the one that expresses our broad strokes.
Yes.
And see, then I don't see, if we're gonna get real specific in it, then you've jumped into the other one too.
It's a fine line. I truly do look at it like a relay race. And this is the first leg of that race. And we hand it off and hand it off and hand it off. So, yes, a comprehensive plan, depending again on the locality and what the locality wants to have in their plan, it can look like a strategic plan. Usually you have 2 or 3, maybe a half a dozen critical factors that are, but oftentimes we'll hit a sandbar as a county. And it's like, how do we get out of this? How do we get unstuck? And so sometimes we'll look at the comp plan to see if there's any guidance there. And oftentimes it's like we need to update our comp plan to handle this one thing. What if we didn't have a comp plan update for 20 years? Very, very common. I'd say that's probably the average age of a comp plan. So we then, you know, a great example would have been this renewable energy discussion. It's usually something like that that starts to circle a local government to where we feel like we need to be proactive in stating our intentions for that land use. In this case, the renewable energy principles. And that's kind of what happened. We didn't do a full update, we just changed the sections of the land use goals and objectives to buttress and fortify against any claims that a renewable energy applicant would have to the county. So usually it takes something like that as the impetus to move forward with an update to the comprehensive plan. Here, we kind of took care of that, and I really feel like the last maybe 3 years we've discussed, after a mildly contentious meeting, man, maybe we should update the comp plan and address some of these specific things. And so that's where we're at today. But yes, a comp plan should be very general. You know, depending on the staff, we do have an economic development coordinator for Osage County. So that makes having a separate standalone strategic action plan for economic development as a standalone or apart from our job easy to ask for. Not every county has that. Some counties have this department that's really strong or that department that's really strong. So really, we take what is the current state of events, and we know that there's a major employer, again, theoretically, to our south. And so the comp plan's second primary thing that's unique to any other county. So let's say 80 to 85% of what's in this plan go through and find, replace, and change county names. It's going to have a lot of the same goals and objectives because Osage County shares a lot of the same issues, strengths and weaknesses and opportunities with other counties, other surrounding counties. Are we sharing the same issues as Shawnee County and Douglas County? Not necessarily. But we also want to take a good look at Lyon and Franklin County because they're kind of the next, from a population standpoint, kind of the next rung up. what's Franklin County, once you start growing, you see this especially in small cities that start to get close to a class 2 city, getting close to a class 1 city, fundamentally that government changes. You can't have a city clerk that runs half of it and a city manager that runs the other half. You need a police chief. You need a city clerk that just does clerk business. You need a city administrator to do everything. You need a public works director, et cetera, et cetera. You need to start having a bigger form structure of governance. Here, we're not calling for that. So we're really just trying to focus on those handful of unique issues that we're dealing with currently. And that employment potential of having a radically increased employment base regionally, we try to make assumptions as to what spillover effect we can have, we can enjoy and or suffer through when we have X thousands of new employees, what percentage would be relocating to Osage County, what percentage is going to be going through our county to live in Topeka, bypass our county to live in Ottawa or Emporia, et cetera. So, not perfect science, and really shouldn't be perfect science, but we should be aware of that potential to affect our day-to-day jobs here. What are we gonna do for housing? You know, Linden and Osage, if they were located in the south third of the county, would be wonderful. We'd be beating the drums, but we don't. We have communities that are at capacity for sewer. And even though we have a relative abundance of water sources, we don't have the treatment or carrying infrastructure to make that available to individual homeowners, right? So, and we can't control that. We're water districts. So we need to just figure out what we're dealing with, what hand we got dealt, and how to best play that hand. So dealing with the quality of housing. To do that best, we have determined that we should look at adopting certain building codes and having a building inspector to enforce it. Code enforcement has been, for every jurisdiction that has zoning code enforcement is always a problem, whether you're Wichita, Sedgwick County, or you're Osage County, Kansas. So from that standpoint, that certainly needs to be the hallmark of that is one of the more unique elements of our comp plan compared to the other comp plan. This potential employment base affects housing, as we talk a little bit about again. We're going to have an influx, maybe an uptick in housing starts, then it certainly endorses the idea of getting building codes and building inspectors. So, like I said, if there is a better, we all have sat here and listened to numerous conditional use permits. If there are specific calls for action of changes in the zoning regulations, we can certainly make that in the comp plan and then ratify it through a zoning regulation amendment at a later date.
Is there a way, I don't think there is, probably. I'm on a water board, okay? I went to a water meeting last night. The problem is, all these rural water systems are set up by the federal government. Every one of them, like we have, we're kind of odd in my district, because I have 2 sources of water I now have. Most of them have 1, or maybe 2, but there's no room for expansion, is my point.
Yes.
Because the line from my plant brings the water to my district at a certain size, so they don't lose chlorine, okay? Got another district over here just beyond this, short of water. How can we make it so that that line suddenly carries more water than it can? See what I'm saying? They sized it, and there's no way to get more water through it, or we could expand, because like Burlingame, they can't sell meters because they don't have any more water. It's not, if they could get more water, they could sell more units by far.
Doesn't Burlingame get water, some of their water
Topeka.
supply from Osage City?
Topeka, no. Burlingame does.
Oh.
The water district does not.
Oh, yeah.
Burlingame and Arville gets all theirs out of Osage City, out of nowhere.
Yeah, the fundamental, the overarching fundamental problem with rural water districts is their largest line's a 2-inch line. You simply can't fire hydrant off of that, so fire protection goes to hell. Your insurance rate, you know, one.
We've got a lot of
friend-
6-inch lines.
Huh?
We have a lot of 6-inch lines.
Good.
But, oh yes, we do.
You may have been the first one to mention that to me in 28 years.
Okay, all right, we have a lot of 6-inch lines. 4 inches, very common.
So, the county's not gonna get, the county's not gonna get into the water distribution business. Cities aren't, any city in Osage County is not gonna get into the large-scale water distribution. Water distribution to neighboring counties was a huge moneymaker for the city of Wichita. We're not talking about that, right? So honestly, I mean, there is nothing that the county can do short of partnering with grant writing, I guess.
Right.
But
I wish,
the
I wish.
rollout of rural water district was not intended to be a quasi-urban water distribution system. But it was probably planned to have 4 homes on a section. I don't know, something like that.
What it was planned as was if you wanted rural water, when they started, they come around, you wanted $250, you had to put a deposit. You had no idea if it was gonna come or not.
Yep.
Be honest with you. You put $250 down saying you were willing to take water. And then after they got all that done, then they went to FHA and they decided if that line was feasible or not off the amount of water they had. The problem was the line was sized for the, because when my dad and I got the first deal, I had to tell them how many gallons of water my farm would use. And I thought I was gonna feed a lot of cattle, so I put quite a big figure in there.
Mhm.
Turned out lucky because I've got 3 meters on that one line now. And it's a 2-inch line, not a 1-inch line like it would have been to that house.
Yeah.
But point being, they sized every line. It gets smaller as they get out here.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you lose your chlorine factor, and that water has to be tested every month. We send it our test. So it has to sign so enough water runs through that line. But now, you see, the problem is now, is my line isn't big enough for like Burlingame would love to have more water, of course. The other thing is right now, when you figure out what it costs per mile to lay a water line,
I work for a civil engineering company. Yes.
I just watched less than 1/8 of a mile cost us $40,000.
Right, so you can't really, just sitting here talking off the top of my head, rural water districts may be worked with to solve a certain problem. Let's say some of the subdivisions, the subdivisions out by Pomona is probably a bad example, but we've had several, I think there's one west of the Four Corners on the south side of the highway there.
Yeah, I think
It
there
was
is.
an airstrip, one of the airstrip.
Rogers.
Oh, you mean Rogers
Yeah,
Airport?
it's- yeah.
That's between here and Four Corners.
Yeah, good.
It's just north of the creek.
I always forget how far up north. So, I got a call from somebody a couple of years ago about that project. So I knew that that was kind of a similarly dysfunctional subdivision that was done in the 60s, right?
Right.
With no guarantee for water and sewer on-site. So the ability to maybe have a rural water district fix a specific problem or two in their jurisdiction is about the best we can hope for. But not to serve these 8 sections of ground, right? We're not expanding a growth boundary to support 300 new homes.
Right.
That's not gonna happen, because
Takes
it's
a main
never
line.
designed for that, and you've got, whether you're a sewer system or a water system, you have to 36-inch water, 60-inch water, raw water line, down to a 36, down to a 24, down to an 18, 16, 12, 8, and 4, 2, and 1.
You have a 15
Right.
down at Wichita.
Hmm?
You have a 15-foot one down there at Wichita.
I know we have 60-inchers coming from Cheney. So, it's one thing to go $40,000, half a mile extension of a 2-inch water main.
Right.
But to support that 2-inch water main, you're gonna have to go back to that 6-inch main. And from that 6-inch main to a 12 or a 24, you're gonna have to bump those up all the way back to the source, right? So, you know,
See, that's what
chlorination,
gets expensive.
chlorination units, I think it was around $80,000 for one
Yeah.
in Marion County, and it was just to gut the old pump house and put in a new chlorination unit and pump. So it wasn't to establish a new one, it was just to modernize an existing pump, chlorination system. So we can't really have too many expectations. So what you'll see in general terms in these comprehensive plans is called making sure that we aren't approving these rural subdivisions that can't support on-site systems, right? So we're not saying how we can expand, we're talking about how we can hold the leash on rural development. Unless it's a place like Pomona that there's a critical mass to where it breaks over, then yes, now we can specially assess some of these vacant lots that will be built on, because we're going to get wastewater treatment.
Right.
A quasi-municipal wastewater treatment facility out there, kind of like Sailaway, theoretically had.
Right, or had.
Theoretically.
Now it's coming back again. No,
It's the only solution, and it's the poorest solution of all of them.
Yeah.
It is the only one available. So, we talked about the plan being general. That Pomona Lake subdivision study is going to be an offshoot of this planning action. I will have a separate report just on ways, what the problem is out there at Pomona Lake with underdeveloped subdivisions and what our options are as a county. So that report will come when we're closer to the finalizing of this comprehensive plan in general. So the plan calls for that study, calls for investigating and researching solutions to that problem that we've identified. But again, it's not gonna be in the comp plan, it's gonna be in a standalone report.
Are the goals and the objectives the policy? Or is the policy a different piece?
In a general term, yes, it would be the policy.
The goals and the objectives?
The goals and objectives, yeah. So the county can certainly adopt standalone policies that are more specific based on what's in the comp plan. So if this is the trunk of the tree, that type of specific policy would be the first branches off of that trunk. So yeah, if there's something that we identify that is locally unique, or it simply happens to be one of our amber or red flashing lights on our dashboard, we can address it in whatever fashion, typically a very generalized. Let's say we never had a discussion about Pomona Lake subdivisions. And Jan brings it up tonight. Then we'd go back and we'd talk about it. We'd still call for a separate report on that. And if that report calls for the county spending X number of dollars to build or to rehab to create a wastewater sewer improvement district, then the action of the county commission would be then to budget for that project, hire consultants to direct that project, issue resolutions to the outlay of money to support that project or get that project built, and that's how it would carry on. So it would be mentioned in the comp plan, carried out through separate action. I would call it a general policy guideline. I suppose one way to skin this cat would be to collect. One option, and I don't have a preference, would be to collect the 5 of your comments, summarize them into 3 or 4 page summary, and go over those specifically, or if we can just go chapter by chapter, and whoever has an issue on certain pages, we can talk about it on the fly if we want. It's truly up to you how you want to digest the elephant.
Would it be best to go to focus on those 10 pages of goals and objectives and fine tune those? And then once those are fine tuned, go back to the section in the book that pertains to that and see how it needs to be adapted for
We
those?
certainly, we certainly can. I've had people fight me on US Census data. This says the population is 12,365. I got this on Google, it says it's 13,960. Like,
Big deal.
pick your reference.
Right.
Secretary of State of Kansas is probably that's what every city clerk has to submit, and county clerk submits to the state for an actual population. Some people demand that I use that because it came from them. Some people hate the US Census. So my question back to them would be, is it critical that there's a 85-person differential in the population, especially population forecast? So a lot of this background information is somebody who's just been through this. We can certainly talk about what the census information that I've included means, or we don't want that information in there. Or usually I try to write those population and economic sections to be as benign as possible. This is facts. This is just facts about the county. It's a snapshot. You know, if we have X percentage of our workforce in this particular industry, it's a fact. It doesn't drive really anything else that we do here, right? That information would be more pertinent to Colleen to go out and recruit a better mix or a diverse mix of industries, right? So that's something that's in the comp plan, just to basically illustrate who we are. What do we do? What we're comprised of? Generally, where does the population live? What's the capacity of our cities to handle growth? Because the comp plan is saying, look, if you are a subdivision, if you are a large employment type of industry or commercial venture that's gonna bring a lot of commercial traffic, and we heard that at the Dollar General debate, when we heard about CUP, that's it, that's the issue. And that's the issue of the comprehensive plan. Look, we are a county township unit government. Townships aren't going to be able to rapidly address capacity and road safety as the county would if it was a county unit road system, right? County unit road systems usually have a larger staff, and all the budget goes to that. So you're not having to say, we would say yes to this project, but that township board said no. That's fair. That's how all the players are supposed to react to a question. But we don't, but it limits our plan to direct action because we don't control that, just like we don't control rural water districts. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't be stated as an intention that we would like to see this happen. But we can't formally go into the back of the book and create an objective saying short-term objective to expand rural water district 6.
Right. Or
To serve this area.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's a good thing that you got 2 township board members here. It's so important that we look and see what kind of road we're on. Somebody comes in and says, oh, we'll build a housing development on it.
Yep.
And some of our roads are good roads, there's no problem. I have some good roads in my township. Some of them aren't as good. And then they want to put it down that, and then they want to bring that road up to a new standard for them.
That's a great point.
I mean, to your point also, which is really interesting, is that I just located 18 water meters on a property that has 1,600 foot of road frontage. But guess what? One of those roads were 15 of those water meters are, is a low-maintenance road. So it's just like this constant struggle.
And part
You
of
know, you can't get them to line up.
And he really, we bought those for a speculative answer, that's what happened there.
Yeah.
He's figuring he's gonna sell those off down that road someday.
Well, and when they apply for their building permit, there's a portion in there that they understand, and we've had this issue, that if they're wanting to build on a minimum maintenance road, they have
They have to
the
pay.
property owner has to bring that road up to grade.
Our township has passed that. I don't think your county has. I'm sorry to say it that way.
But see, this is a good
But
example.
so much of we want this growth and we want, you know, to build the tax base, but it's difficult to do so when you have, it's more cost prohibitive to be able to use those 18 water meters along that road. You know, but it would be a great place for 10-acre parcels.
Yeah, so that's a great example of, so we've identified an issue, and this is a standard issue in 80-some counties that have the county township unit road system.
35 don't.
Somewhere in there, yeah. Somebody asked me about that, like the last, I was told in one plan, as I was getting ready to say, hey, look at me, the guy from Wichita, I got a perfect solution, just adopt a county unit road. So I learned that the last time that any county changed its road system was in 1977 or 78. So that leaves me to one problem, and that is, that's a big stone to lift, and I know how to lift it. So, again, that's a great example of a problem that limits, or that directly is probably one of the top 3 or 5 top things that dictate our land use decisions. So, we identified that. We could actually have a goal and objective, more to your point of how's this comp plan going to help guide our decisions on these CUPs? We could, if we wanted to be real prescriptive, create an objective that says that we will prevent any industrial or commercial development or more than X number of homes on any given quarter section if it's on a township road. Or we defer, we get with our townships and it's like, we have to have this standard. If there's gonna be 6 homes or 4 homes on a half a mile, we need this standard of road. And we write that in to our zoning regulations as a new standard on which to apply to each and every development application. That's kind of the transition from us having a conversation here to having something wind up in our regulations that is tangible to our decision-making on each individual land use application, whether that's.
Well, I'd like it if some way was there a thing as a county-wide that's the case. But I know that I found out before you were here, that was the way, it wasn't the way it was. I found out my township was one of the few, and that was on advice of my council that we use. He happens to live in the district too. And he said, you need a policy, because otherwise you will have to bring that road up to standards. And the way we've got it is written, we'll do some of the dirt work, but all rock is up to county spec before we will take over.
Yeah, so that, you can imagine that Wichita, especially a decade ago, growing wildly. And so we had a very big problem with new development. And these new developments would take probably on average an 80-acre tract. Johnson County, they probably swallow a quarter section or a half section per project, right? So Wichita is about an 80 to a quarter section. So we're talking about a quarter mile to a half a mile of paving. So it got to the problem where there were certain developers benefiting more than others, and so they standardized a paving policy. And this is to take a county road, an unpaved county road, to a paved county standard, which is what a lot of our highways are here, and what our paved asphalt county roads are. And that's 2 lanes of travel with wider, more gradual shoulders, like a 4-foot rocked shoulder. I'd call that a county standard. An urban standard is pavement with curb and gutter and stormwater sewer. So here, borrow ditches and just a wider paving surface to an asphalt standard. So we can have road standards as a policy that road and bridge would carry out. We can call for that in the development. And it sounds like there was kind of a half-started movement towards this. Maybe we need to dust that thing off and see if it needs to be shined up and put back on the bookcase. Applicable to
Well,
every.
see if it comes to the county, and we had that as a deal, when she handed out a permit, that would be right there. If they're on a minimum maintenance road, they know they're gonna have to do something.
Yeah. We dealt with that on the sawmill that was partially located in the road ditch.
Yeah.
You know, could there have been something in our regulations that could have better advised us on how to handle that approval? Perhaps to support a denial or something like that.
So I didn't read close enough because we've got so many feet from the road. And he got less feet than he should have had. You know,
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't know if that was our fault when we looked at the thing and when none of us caught it. I really don't know how you can say that because somehow we fell down. I can say I fell down because I didn't catch it. I mean,
It
he,
looked
and
like
if,
somebody
and if he would have,
stepped off from the fence line and said, this is 50
yes,
feet.
I agree with you. And you know, if he would have just turned the sad part is a dock, it sticks out there, he puts logs on it. If it would have been at a 45, he would have been far back off the road.
Or on the side of the building.
Or either, yeah, off of one end of the building instead of going toward the road.
So, yeah, and I'm thinking of the lady that lived a quarter mile
Right.
away. That's true. That rock dust is blowing,
Yep,
yeah, so,
same principle. But that's like this last one up there. I went over in great detail with that young man because of what we'd had before, but I said, for gosh sake, don't think and put that thing on the side so you're so many feet back like you're supposed to be and there's not a question. And so far it's stayed pretty good at it. At least when I went by, it's all right.
the traffic, log hauling trucks was one of the primary.
Another thing.
Was to me, the more primary issue.
Yeah.
Keep that thing out of our ditch. Don't really care if you're 50 or 150 feet off the road necessarily, relative to having lumber trucks rolling down an undersized roadway.
Well, then on top of that, they parked on the road and unload. And that makes it down to one small lane.
Yeah. So yes, there are some of these issues that we bring out that we can ultimately try to fashion into, do we need to, is this something, road standards, is this something that we should now take a look at, since it's been identified in our conversations about the comprehensive plan? Is this something that we need to then turn our attention to? How do we implement that? Best outcome, best practices, if you will, into our zoning regulations. And I will say, and I'm not trying to, this isn't cold water at all, it's just a reality, is there's some of the stuff that we're all going to be in agreement with, that the county commission's going to look at and say, hey, are you tying our hands here? So,
Yep.
that's something else to keep in mind, and I'm glad that we have interest and a certain level of engagement from the three commissioners. I think it's imperative. Most times, I will say probably 75% of the time, the governing body is pretty much hands-off of the development of the comp plan until it reaches them, and then it's their first turn to look at what's in there. Because we're tying not only our hands, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but we're also tying the ultimate decision makers, and that's the governing bodies. So, from that standpoint, you just don't want to have a comprehensive plan full of surprises. And I'd like to think that I wasn't bold enough, let's say, to put a lot of surprises in there. Quite frankly, the land use policies are pretty much the same. They were very generalized to begin with, and we kept that generalized, and we ratchet down and tighten up the areas that we need to tighten up. So certainly look forward to your comments going forward on this project, as well as department heads. And ultimately, I feel like the three commissioners are engaged to the point where they're not, I'm not saying that they have to review everything before we do, but they're apprised of what's in the plan, more or less. They're certainly apprised of what's not in the plan, and that's any type of restructuring or major land use policies that we have established over the last couple of years, specific to renewable energy systems.
Can I ask a question of our county commissioner tonight?
I can't believe you're asking me permission.
I just want to see if I can get you right in the middle of it. My point
I'm always
was,
right in the middle of it.
has our philosophy from the county commission changed since we changed commissioners?
You mean since January?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know that I can speak for the board as a body, but I don't know that we've had any discussions about anything particular that deals with the philosophy to be able to answer that at this point.
You have not talked about windmills or solar panels or anything in yet?
No.
Okay. Then you'll know, right?
And quite
I'm
frankly,
sorry, what is
oh, go ahead. I was gonna say, quite frankly, we don't need to. They're prohibited. We didn't change anything.
No, I
The
know.
policies in the plan are the exact same policies
Right.
that were in there since,
I kind of like to have
October
an
20.
idea of where we should be heading to, so is my problem, my man.
that's,
You know, I don't want to get a surprise from there, send it up to them, and they say, what the hell did you do here? I'm sorry, I don't want to use that language, but that's just what it comes back as. And I don't want that. I want to kind of know what their feeling is as well as ours.
I don't change anything unless asked to change.
Okay.
So, from that standpoint, and perhaps that makes me a bad consultant. Oftentimes, yeah, there are certainly a lot of people like me that feel it's their providence to inform you people out here in Osage County, Kansas, of some of the wonderful things that the American Planning Association wants to see in the comprehensive plans. So you will not see 30 by 30 in here. You will not see, I try to keep this to a minimum of what the county needs to run its business. And some places like a lot of specificity. Typically cities are more than counties, and there's certain cities more than certain counties. So again, not to keep using my home base as an example, but as one of the larger, more populated counties in Kansas, they have to get into the specifics. They have to get way down into the specifics because we got 300,000 people trying to skirt the system, right? And developments out in the county directly, and quite frankly, stand to impede Wichita's growth. And we have a joint city-county planning effort. So, again, here, I like to keep things general. Typically, the governing bodies like things general, so they can make the decisions that they think best facilitate life in Osage County. So from that standpoint, yes, is this kind of lukewarm? Yeah, it is, by design. We add to it what we need to address those dozen things, half a dozen things that are truly unaccounted for or need loosening or tightening. So most everything else is fairly generalized because we are in, I'd say all the counties that I've dealt with have one characteristic, and that is that, look, we identify the fact that the Midwest in general, rural populations, but rural populations in the Midwest are suffering declines in population. And so in doing this community planning stuff almost singularly for the last 6 years, I've never been asked to make the rules necessarily tighter. I think you'll see a lot of what we've done here in our subdivision regulations has been to open up the ability for us to do lot splits in a more proactive way, in a way that if you can get Keenan to say yes, who are we to say no, is kind of the general philosophy. So from that standpoint, I don't see that needle moving very much for our county or for really most counties in Kansas that aren't in these growth vectors. Now, we've talked a lot last spring about, well, that's fine for maybe the next 10 years. But beyond that, when Franklin County slowly becomes old Douglas County and Douglas County becomes old Johnson County, we're gonna become old Franklin County, where we're going to experience more people either outflowing as permanent residents of the Kansas City Metroplex, or at the very least weekenders, right? They're still gonna need their homes built. So from that standpoint, I'm not saying things will ever change. Things could change rapidly, but I think right here, it still situates us, it puts us in a position to better account for future change. And the plan calls for realizing that there is a strong potential for that change that could have a disruption to the southern tier of cities. You know, oftentimes, it's such a complex thing where these people may land. School districts are one of the big drivers. Access to shopping is another. There's certain amenities that certain employment bases prefer, and so we simply don't know. The best we can come up with is a traffic study. That traffic study was specific to Coffee County and what improvements it needed to make in the immediate environs of that chips factory to handle traffic of that employment base. And it gives very, very loose estimations of what percentage are gonna go north into Osage County, what percentage is going to travel to Emporia, to Ottawa, and Kansas City, as well as be absorbed by Coffee County cities, Burlington, etc. And that's simply, you start getting into that level of assumptions, you're not much better off just simply being unaware with it. There's not a lot that we can do. Unless somebody has $1 million that they can spend.
Russ, I just wanted to ask, we're an hour into this, and if we don't go through this chapter by chapter, I don't know about you folks, but I have some questions for clarification, that if we just jump to the objectives, will we get back to kind of identifying those, being able to answer those clarifying questions?
We can certainly,
Because I think chapter 1, check, 5 minutes, right? Chapter 2, maybe 5 or 10 questions. I mean, we can move through this pretty quickly, not suggesting that we do, but that we do the due diligence of opening it up to see if there are questions by chapter. Does that make sense?
yeah, I would say we'd want to end on goals and objectives, because everything that we've seined out of the pond, going through chapter by chapter,
Rules.
we will be developing stuff that's gonna go in the final chapters.
Is that agreeable to you folks?
Works for me.
That bothers me.
And we're able to also provide feedback this evening, or do you guys want us to do it separately with us?
Doesn't matter to me.
No, I want it on the board.
Yeah,
I don't want it done,
separately. Got it.
yeah, I want it done with us.
Gotcha.
It all passes through you
Yeah.
before it gets to the commissioners. And again, I feel like it should go without saying that that's probably a bad opinion. You will all be apprised from this version of the document. This version hasn't changed at all. You will be apprised, I will separate out every change that we've made to this book in a separate memo when we get to the our final destination for recommendation. So each iteration, whether it's the next meeting, the next 3 meetings, we will have a running account of what has changed and what hasn't. Because you're gonna shotgun to me, I I want this to, I want there to be more information about township road standards. Well, that leaves it to me to go back, write that up as I see it, and then give it to you to review. So you will see any change from this book. I'm not going to, it's massive text on page 63, let's stick a third sentence in there somewhere.
So Ross, one of the questions that I have is, Tricia has taken the initiative to, as I understand it, to get a lot of community input through our social media, which is everything to do with my job is about community. So do you folks want that information beforehand, or should we go through this first as a group and then consider the public information? How do you suggest we handle that?
I'd like to see the results. I don't know if you have a deadline on yours, but I'd like to see that. I know that from less than 2 years ago, the 10, 12 hours we all spent in public meetings, 3 different meetings, 97% of the county that showed up at these meetings said no to the green energy, no to taking our farmlands up for that. And I don't think that's changed. When one person gets on the county commission and thinks it's a good idea, the rest of the county hasn't changed their mind. So I'd like to see what kind of input you get on
So
your.
would
So
I-
far, I have
It needs to be done.
had 214 responses
I got another one here.
That's awesome.
in 3 days, and the main thing was because everything that we had that had went into this was based on the economic development study that was done at Willows Bend. And not knowing who was there, how those people were picked or invited, and I received a lot of questions concerning the comprehensive plan of when is the county going to be questioned on it, when is our input going to be a factor to this comprehensive plan? And so far, 214. I basically just, with the help of KCPZO, went on and copied Miami County, Johnson County, their questions, narrowed it down. Huh? You did it too?
I could have got that too.
Oh. And basically just, these are the questions. So, basically just narrowed them down to what was relevant for Osage County. We don't have, different systems that Miami County does.
So just one point of clarification, for the 2023 Vision Summit, we opened that up to everyone. We tried to solicit, I can tell you, I personally sent 75 letters to township people, mailed them personally, tried to reach out, but I was pretty new then. So I didn't know a lot of the, local social media sites and stuff like that. I counted on other people sharing the information, but we had business owners. We made sure that every single district, including all of that, was represented there, from schools to businesses to municipality leaders. So I feel like at the time, it was the best that we could do in terms of gathering people. And even though you beseech people to come, the attendance, it was, we had nearly 100 people. But I'm really encouraged that she's been able to get more new and relevant information now, so that's great.
I don't know if you noticed, Jason put an article on social media.
Is that right?
I mean,
Great.
Yeah.
Sarah was sharing that.
He asked for a response to the owner, provided a link to it, no problem.
Yeah, it was outstanding.
Well, I think Shannon Engler started it, and I did a post like it, and it just went like wildfire.
So-
I sent it, I personally texted it. It took me an hour to 120 people.
Awesome, that's great. great.
And most of those are couples, and most of them were responsive to filling it out.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now we know how to do this again.
So do you want a rundown of where we're at so far?
Yeah.
A quick, maybe quick.
Because I think you'll have a lot more coming in to that, but
Can it be posted in like, because you're active like on a lot of the buy-sell trade groups and stuff, aren't you?
Yeah.
Could it be
yeah.
posted in more public places like that? To
It
keep
could,
people
I
more-
just, basically left it to the public to really share it.
Mhm.
So, okay, so out of our answer, 215. 208 live in the county, 58 work in the county. Let's see, we've got them from all over. Rank the top reasons you live in Osage County. Number 1 was rural atmosphere, close to family, small towns, cost of living, close to work, outdoor recreation, the proximity to Topeka Lawrence, urban metro, and then schools. How long have you lived in the county? The majority of people that answered 21 to 30 years. We only had one person answer less than a year. Let's see, out of everybody that answered, 102 work in the county and 113 don't. 203 of the respondents own their home, 10 rent, and 2 are other. So rank the following to what is most important to you when deciding where development should occur in Osage County. Rural characteristics, agriculture, economic vitality, housing, environmental resources and conservation, employment, utility infrastructure, roadway connections and conditions, parks and open spaces, and then school locations. Where do you think future residential growth should occur? Within cities, then on the edge of cities, in the unincorporated areas along paved roads, then undeveloped rural areas, and last was around the lakes. Rank the following issues regarding Osage County's future. Most important was the increased property taxes. It's no surprise because they just keep going up. Second was quality schools. Third, rapid residential growth in rural areas, then lack of commercial development. Fifth was availability of health care. Preservation in natural areas, watersheds, wetlands, and open spaces. Lack of parks and outdoor recreational spaces. Eighth was impacts on roads and abutting neighbors by increased development on gravel roads, and last was tourism. Rank the following types of development for Osage County. So the number 1 type was single family, then senior housing, then multifamily residences. 4th was commercial, 5th was education, then agriculture, then outdoor recreational facility. 8th was tourism, 9th was office business park, and 10th was rails to trails. Should the county have building codes? 142 people, 66% said yes. 27% said no, and 70% said other. And then contractor licensing, yes was 58% with 125, no at 76, 35%, and then other was 7%. Should the county require registration of vacation rentals? Yes at 96, no at 107, and other was 12. Who should be responsible for the cost of extending road improvements and services such as sewers, water lines, and other utilities to new residential or commercial development owned by private industry? 59% of 126 said a combination of county and developer. 64 people, so 30% said the developer. 8%, 17 said the county, and then 8 people said other. Should the county, along with the cities, use tax dollars to recruit new businesses and industries? Yes, 97, no, 92, and other 26. Now, I will say when I printed this, or when you print this off, or, you know, pull that view up, on the yes, the majority of them said yes, but. And it was for specific types of development. Basically, if they were going to have more than 50 employees, then yes, the county should help. Is increasing alternative modes of transportation, biking, bus, walking, important for the future growth of Osage County? No, 134%, yes, or 134 people, yes, 74, and others said 7. So, and then I had the ages. More women than men answered. And then 215 responses on what kind of businesses. And there were a lot of farm home stores, things of that sort. A lot of it was truck stops. Healthcare was a huge, huge one. Let's see here. Grocery stores, distribution center, manufacturing was another big one. And then I have to open it up, but what would you like to see different concerning the land use? There was 213 of those responses. Another big thing, what would you want to say the same with land use? A big one was no windmills. And then maintenance of dirt roads needs improvement, and paved roads should be done. Slowly growing enables the county to keep up with housing challenges. And then I've had a lot of, please publish the results of the survey.
Which, by the way, makes a fantastic appendix A in the complement.
So with social media, it runs its course in 2 to 3 days.
Mhm.
So I think we're past the course, so it's gotta be pushed back out if you want more. And then it'll go like wildfire again.
Yeah.
But it's gotta be pushed really hard, and then everybody shares it, and then it's buried in the newsfeed within a few days.
One thing that's surprising to me from, and I don't remember what categories it was, but schools were at the bottom.
I noticed that in a lot of the.
That was for where should development occur, which, so that didn't really surprise me because generally your
There
schools
was a
are.
couple of them, that schools were at the bottom.
You have, I was a little surprised, given the state of our schools, on that it was as high up as it was on, yeah, the qualities.
I was unclear of what the results were on the bike paths and walking trails. Can you repeat that?
So it varies. Let me go to here because okay. Is increasing alternative modes of transportation, is that the one you're talking about?
Mhm.
So is increasing alternative modes of transportation, biking, bus, walking, important for the future growth of Osage County? 62% said no. 34% said yes. So 134 people said no. 7 people said other, and then 74 said yes. So if we go over, okay, so on the spreadsheet, when I pull it up, like this one, it says yes, but it's a city issue. Yes, we need need sidewalks in our cities. Yes, more sidewalks. Yes, sidewalks in the cities, stay out of the county. Yes, in the city, no to trails. So you have to go and look at the spreadsheet portion, because even though they said yes, you have to look if they left a comment with it,
Sure.
because, you know, there, and possibly, I mean, if I go over, you can see if it's, so the ones that said yes, or like this one that said yes, and it's needed sidewalks, they live in Linden. You know, so you can go and look and see, okay, this person said yes, you know, the one that said no city issue, Elk Township. You can stay out of the county, Valley Brook. So, you know, that's a county person that's, then you can go in, one of the suggestions for an activity was public shooting range in a complex. So I thought it was interesting to go and look at what some of the ideas that the public had for, you know, different,
Any entrepreneurs in the room?
I think that's very fitting for us to check, actually. Shooting range.
Need to go up and see Harrison's and say, hey, maybe you could add something.
Will not do it. The suicide rate at those facilities is really, and he said, we're not going to bring that up.
So we're gonna tax this thing.
That's just it.
So we're gonna tax the first.
And even to pull up the, and we've had quite a few on, it is very adamant that there's not a single one on here that mentioned windmills. If they mentioned windmills, it was keep them out. But there were some positives for solar. Let's see, and then as far as.
And they didn't say residential. A lot of people, when they think solar's not allowed, it's the industrial.
Mhm.
It's, you know, they can still do it on their home if they want to spend the money on it.
So if we have, on that topic, if there are projects still being developed, so like there's one being developed for solar, what is the process for those people trying to develop those if we have banned them? Like, what's that look like? If they want to try to push the issue with the county, what does that look like?
Take what we did in October of '22 and do the opposite. We will amend the comprehensive plan unless it happens within the course of adopting the comp plan. Create a new set of land use goals and objectives that are positive towards that type of development, and then do an amendment to undo the prohibition in our zoning regulations.
But how do the entities wanting to bring that in, what is their first, what do? Do they go to the commission? Do they come to our board? How do they present that?
The commissioner's gotta change it first.
Usually you buy an election.
Wouldn't they start with us? I mean, if they.
They would have to, and they can't.
Not the way the commissioners signed it, they have to go to the commissioners
Anytime,
first.
our actions can come from all quarters. It could be a grassroots public, we could have, make Osage County bright again, solar proponents, and have 30 people here ask us to do that work. The majority vote of the planning commission can then direct me to make those amendments to the comp plan and to the zoning regulations, and see what happens. Recommend approval, recommend denial. So from that standpoint, wearing my day job hat, there are certain projects that we'll have clients come to our office and discuss, and it's like, fantastic. We will certainly take your money, but you gotta call a majority of the governing body, city council, county commission, because we can't control that. So it would have to be unwound, just like it was wound up a couple years ago.
Mhm.
And that effort started at the county commissioner level and worked its way down to us.
Gotcha.
So we can introduce things to subdivision zoning, comp plan, the primary task that we're responsible for. Statutes allow us to make that. It's incredibly rare, but because planning commissioners aren't elected, they're appointed by the governing body, but you'd be surprised that there are probably about 10% of them out there that the governing body and the planning commission are on opposite sides of issues. And it always dumbfounds me because you don't like a council person, why did you appoint these people? So typically, I would say 80% of the time, 90% of the time, the county commission, however they get input from the public, from whomever, will direct us to engage in that action.
Okay.
in a minute.
Thank you.
Whereas the individual little changes of zoning codes that we do, subdivision regulations that we do, that usually just comes from us. We do it, and like I mentioned to Trish, you know, this is a small courthouse. Things aren't gonna sneak by the people that work here, including the governing body members. So we all have a pretty good ear to the ground on what's happening in Osage County. So, typically that's the standard process.
Can I just ask another question? If we're going to kind of slow down to speed up on the process, should we postpone the leadership work session until you guys have had a chance to actually walk through this?
Can you tell us what is the leadership workshop session, please?
Basically, it's where, well, I was hoping when we scheduled it in October that we would kind of have moved through each one of these, basically have an outline, let's say a draft copy. And the idea is that Russ would kind of work through each one of these chapters in a very succinct way, make sure that we have thought about everything from their consideration point, from their filter. And they may have more. My hope is that they actually have more that we haven't even thought about.
Are you meaning the directors?
Yeah, elected officials, directors, the planning commission, and the board of commissioners. That's who we intended to have in that meeting, that work session.
To me, it makes more sense to have that input first before you start working on them. So I'd say go ahead with the department heads and
Yeah,
get
because like
input.
Ryan hasn't even looked at the road infrastructure. He said there was supposed to be a meeting and then the meeting didn't happen, and so he hasn't, you know, he's road and bridge and he has no idea what the road and bridge portion is.
Right, so that leads to the question of, should we go ahead and publish this to the elected officials? And I think that was, Russ, one of our questions that was gonna come out of tonight's meeting is your recommendation that we go ahead and socialize it to them so they can absorb it and then kind of be ready for the meeting? That is if they have time, they're all overextended, right? So.
Well, I think they need to read it if they're gonna have any input.
Yeah.
I would think they'd wanna be up to speed the
Well,
same
yeah.
as we are.
Okay, so I don't know if that can be done
After
after
a meeting.
11. I think that's
Yeah.
another week. Russ, what do you think?
We have 2 weeks. As far as the general sentiment goes, I agree with Jan as far as, I think we would benefit more from their input first than vice versa. They're gonna come at it, they're gonna receive this cold one way or the other. So, I think it helps us keep our pace to have that meeting happen before we make a recommendation on the plan, obviously. There was also, I heard a question in there as to whether or not, I had started this discussion by saying, I typically will go ahead and publish for the public hearing to start the statutory process of adopting the comp plan, knowing that we can continue meetings as necessary, and probably the average is 3 meetings, 2 extensions, 1 public hearing, and then extended for 2 more months. And then usually you see the same thing at the governing body level after we get it out of our court. I think we're gonna have enough attention on the comp plan to where we're not looking at 6 more months. Especially since we're having that March meeting. People are going to be aware of it. And again, road and bridge, we're really not talking about a change in their policy unless we are directed, unless Ryan says, hey, I'd love to see these 3 things in there. Because right now, he's setting that a paragraph.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
it's very
Which
How
we're
many
in
how
somewhat
many people are in
doing.
your department, how many miles of roads, how many paved miles, how many unimproved roads does the county maintain, et cetera, everything in the townships. So, again, what I'm looking for is more, here's the basics of your department, if we even really talked about your department. What do you want as the department head? What does the sheriff want to see in there? What does Ryan want to see in there that's not in there? Is really kind of how I approach it. Start minimal, add to it, as opposed to throw everything in there and start figuring out what you want to cut. So, because somehow once it's on the page, it feels like it ties our hands. So that would be my, I like having that leadership meeting first. I like the fact that it was gonna come before our next meeting. But I started this conversation off by saying this about notifying. Perhaps we can certainly hold off and have the notice published for the public hearing in April instead of March.
It's already published because in order for it to be published on Thursday, so it's got 2 weeks for the March. Because the statute.
So from that standpoint, again, fully, well, put it this way, I've never experienced a comp plan without planning commissioners that don't care at all about the comp plan, so.
Is the March meeting department heads only, or is public invited to that? The March 11th?
I think it's during a commission meeting.
It's following,
Oh,
it's
it's after
immediately
the-
following, yeah, yeah.
It's
We'll do it
department
however we
heads.
need to do it.
Right, it would be for department heads who have sections that they may pertain to their department to have a say, is that correct?
Well, we opened it up to everyone, elected officials and department heads and the planning commission and the board of commissioners. Just because we want to make sure they're involved, so.
But the public hearing part would be what, our next March meeting on the-
Right, right.
Right. Yeah.
So as far as the March 11th thing goes, it's just gonna be
More of a
Yeah.
workshop session.
Yeah.
for us.
Whereas opening it up
Not
to
public.
a broader audience,
Right.
not only township officials, but just John Q. public, right? Would be if we carry on with the March public hearing, and we can start hearing from people and getting input.
Well, a discussion that you and I had, Russ, years ago was, I was a bit frustrated when I came because it was so loosey-goosey and everything was CUPs but I came more to your line of thinking that actually gives us more control to be specific about that instead of having a book and a set rule that we had to start taking restrictions off or whatever, so, I don't want any more restrictions put on anyone that is not necessary, and so I kind of like that we look at each one individually, and I think with what we have going through, we have the luxury of the time to look at each one as it goes through.
Land use
For what?
decisions are just contingent on location, just like anything else. And that gives us, there are going to be sensitive areas that we're gonna have to recommend no. You know, the Dollar General thing provides us an example of, could we have taken, do we need to take a step to enshrine in the zoning regulations a stricter, less malleable set of basic regulations? And it can be basic, dependent on, are you on a township road, a county road, or a highway? We can talk through those things. But I agree in general. Now, like I've mentioned, my day job had historically been to represent zoning cases in front of planning commissions. So I have not met a zoning case that I didn't like, more or less. So from that standpoint, got a fox kind of guarding the hen house here on regulations. But like I mentioned, I've never had a community approach me by trying to beef up regulations. It seems like they started fairly strict or relatively strict, and they just over time haven't worked. Why are we capping lot splits at one additional lot when we're looking to attract housing and population? So that counterintuitive. So I agree, you know, everybody likes their own cooking, and I like my zoning regulations for that flexibility. I think people want that level of control. And it's based, and I think to continue reflecting on that conversation, Jen, you coming from a major metropolitan area, you understand that there's radically different needs when you may drive by a 40-acre piece of ground one day, and the next week it's an apartment complex, it's an 800-unit
Yeah.
apartment complex.
With concrete paving.
With concrete parking. So those things are highly complex, as is the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. That's a complex machine, or not a complex machine. So you get a lot of consultants oftentimes coming out of Kansas City saying, look at this whiz-bang zoning district. Like, great, it will apply once every 80 years in Osage County.
Yeah,
So why make it complicated?
yeah.
It doesn't do the public any good. You want to know, we want a level of transparency. You're hearing, you know, on a case-by-case basis, and you have a set of conditions applied to that specific to its location and surroundings. It's a machine shop or that sawmill with 3 houses on the same half mile, it's gonna create problems. Out there with, you're the only place on that section of ground, is it really that problematic at that location? No. So,
Sorry, I just wanted to circle back to the leadership workshop. Russ, can we lean on you to craft, maybe recraft a memo to the leadership group on what to expect, how to prepare, and then attach the document? Can we lean on you to do that? I want to get out of the shepherding it. We need the Board of Commission to mandate attendance, and we need a proper letter and communication sent out so that they're prepared. I think a week and 2 days is not a lot of time for people that are very, very over capacity in their normal jobs. So,
Well, they'll get a free lunch out of it, so that's,
indeed, indeed.
I think there'll be those that come that haven't read it. And I
Yes.
think that it doesn't matter if you give 2 to 6 weeks, they're gonna read it 1 or 2 nights before.
Right, right. And I love the idea where Russ was saying, hey, Sheriff, here's your section.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that's
I
here's
like
your
that.
section. For the Register of Deeds and the clerk, I don't know where to direct them.
they'll have their ideas from their department,
Yeah.
whether or not they.
I got
read
20 bucks to
them.
say they come and they don't have any input. Sorry for them. You've been great.
We have leaders.
I won't take your bet, I guarantee you.
It's all
Yeah,
gonna be,
but-
depend on how well you write that memo.
There'll be questions then. So, yeah, I have no problem putting that memo together. It's certainly easy enough. I floated the idea of just writing like a 2-page memo that just covers kind of the hallmarks of the plan unique to our county at this time, as well as the adoption. It is a paragraph on the adoption process, and then stick on there that matrix at the end of the document that kind of summarizes all the goals and objectives and puts them into a short-term, mid-term, and long-term implementation schedule. So a 5-page memo is what I was going to do, and then have them, if you want the full document, to have the full document. But usually, that leadership workshop really does shake out of the tree a lot of questions that we won't get answered here. So that's what's good about it, is even if it's their first blush, even if they didn't know anything about the comp plan, already being a year into it, they're going to gauge whether or not this document's important to their department. And so you're gonna have some departments that are just gonna like, it's fine. Other departments, you never know. So a lot of times, Colleen, for example, has done a number of economic development related studies. Coffee County is, or that project in Coffee County has spawned several studies. We had a water study, a traffic study that doesn't really get too much beyond Coffee County's boundary, and this economic summit. So that's great. When I had done the city of Pratt's comp plan, they had just spent a lot of time prior to the start of that comp plan discussing their parks and recreation. We need a new we need our swimming pool to be rehabbed and expanded, partly for a destination, an attraction. Dodge City built one, Garden City built one. Looks like oceans of fun in Garden City. And so everybody in western Kansas was kind of looking at it like, hey, we should do something like this. And Pratt's a kind of a medium-sized gravitational pull where they're at. So we didn't need to spend any time talking about Parks and Rec, because they've spent the last 14 months talking about Parks and Rec and already knew kind of where the ship was heading. So we just took that summary, stuck it in the comp plan. So we don't know, I don't know, which department, when you get into the budget cycle, they will have kind of a strategic plan for their department. In the next year, the next 2 years, we need to hire another sheriff's deputy. We need to get 2 new patrol cars. We need this piece of equipment. We need something. So they kind of know what their needs and wants are and where their problems lie in their department. We just need to, the county commissioners probably are aware of that stuff, but we need to pull that out of their department and put it in the plan in whatever form they want.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of what we're hoping for on the 11th, is just to get that element of input. And then, again, starting in March, carrying through the adoption phase, we're going to have the ability for the public to attend meetings and speak on the issues. 200 people isn't bad on a response of a county of our size. Is it statistically significant? Absolutely not. Do those surveys cost $60,000 and up? Yeah. So that's what a rural Kansas County comp plan kind of is all about. So yeah. Any other immediate questions about this?
Are you folks Osage able to make the 311 meeting, just from a food count perspective?
I think it's
Everybody
already-
can get- Okay.
I'm planning to.
Okay, great.
It's a plan.
Yeah, I've got it on my calendar.
Well, I'm very grateful to Russ for all the work that you've done and for being willing to lead that meeting as well and conversations and bringing this baby home, right?
I don't want to compare it to childbirth. There's too many people, I think I might get
We will persevere.
Long.
That's what we all came here for, is some middle-aged guy to pipe up about childbirth. But no,
But really, we're dreaming for the next generation. This is exciting, really. And there's a pathway of applying the budget and resources to actually bring it to fruition. So it's a good thing.
I think so. I think it should be a project to look positively at.
Anything else? Are we gonna attack any of it tonight, or we just,
Say that again.
are we gonna attack any of it tonight, or we?
Let's get the input.
Hmm?
Let's get the input from the
Okay.
department heads.
Okay.
Hopefully have some good suggestions, and they may have conversations with other departments head and still come up with some other ideas. That'd be great. So,
Anybody got anything else?
the only thing I want to say is excellent, Tricia, on the minutes. They are so good. Thank you.
You got anything, Kim? Trish?
No, not yet.
I'll move with adjourn.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.